go out and make a plan to vote early, vote absentee.
It's impossible to have mail-in voting and have honest elections.
The war on mail-in voting has begun. If you're a senior, a veteran, disabled, or working 2 jobs, too bad. For Donald Trump, it's not about protecting your vote. It's about protecting his power. So the question is, why is Trump taking election security advice from an accused war criminal? And how did he go from using mail-in and absentee ballots himself to calling them corrupt? And could this have anything to do with the fact that Republicans are projected to lose power in 2026? Just a few weeks ago, Donald Trump rolled out the red carpet for Vladimir Putin, an authoritarian and accused war criminal. Trump came back and used that meeting to justify attacking vote by mail in America.
Vladimir Putin, smart guy, said you can't have an honest election with mail-in voting. There's not a country in the world that uses it now. And he said that to me. It was very interesting because we talked about 2020. He said, you won that election by so much.
He's essentially attempting to shift U.S. election policy based on the word of a man who has crushed democracy in his own country. That's as un-American as it gets. Unfortunately, this isn't an isolated incident. It's just the newest example of Trump showing a level of deference and respect for Putin, a man no other president, regardless of party, has ever given in U.S. history.
He's done a very brilliant job in terms of what he represents and who he's representing. He's put himself really, as you know, a lot of people would say, he's put himself at the forefront of the world as a leader.
One of his first actions after that meeting was to punish Colorado for its use of mail-in voting by relocating the U.S. Space Command headquarters from Colorado Springs to Huntsville, Alabama, threatening Colorado jobs and hurting the local economy. For over 150 years, vote by mail has ensured everyone can have a voice in our democracy. Donald Trump, who was voted by mail himself, now wants to end it, not because it's unsafe, but because when more Americans vote, he loses. If you're working 2 jobs just to make ends meet, you already know how hard it is to make time for anything outside of work and general survival, especially if you've got kids. That's exactly why states have expanded access to vote by mail. But the reason it's become a political issue now is the same that it's always been: advantage. Democrats have historically benefited from higher voter participation. So whenever mail-in voting threatens Republican control, Trump attacks it. But when it benefits him or is convenient for him to use, that's how he votes. That's the pattern that we've seen over and over. One of Trump's earliest attacks on vote by mail came in May of 2020. At the start of the pandemic.
For the first time, Twitter is fact-checking some of President Trump's tweets. Those tweets claimed without any evidence that mail-in voting leads to fraud.
He also criticized California's governor for sending ballots to every registered voter, warning that it could lead to a rigged election. A few days later, he repeated his supposed concerns during interviews and rallies, asserting that expanding mail-in voting would make the 2020 election the most corrupt in history. Ultimately, in the 2020 election, over 65 million Americans, about half of all voters, cast their votes by mail, with 60% of Democrats and 32% of Republicans using this option. Despite Trump's repeated lies, millions relied on mail-in voting to safely participate in that election. The thing is, mail-in voting is not new. It's been part of American elections for over a century, and contrary to what Trump's dear friend Putin said, it's also widely used in other countries, including Canada, Germany, Switzerland, and Australia, all of which run free, fair, and trusted elections. It's been tested and proven secure, including in Republican-led states. Courts, bipartisan election officials, and audits consistently confirm that fraud is not widespread.
A federal judge says emails from John Eastman, a former Trump attorney, shows the former president knew his claims of voter fraud were false, and yet he continued to make them in public and in court. The judge writes there was a conspiracy to defraud the United States.
Even Trump himself has used mail-in or absentee ballots, voting by mail twice in Florida in 2020 and absentee in New York in 2018. Ultimately, Trump is attacking mail-in voting because he thinks stopping people from voting this way helps him to stay in power.
Why is it Republicans don't want you to vote? What is it that they're so afraid of? If they think they've got better ideas, why don't they just go make the case? But that's not what they try to do. Instead, you're trying to rig elections. Because the truth is, people disagree with your ideas. And when that doesn't work, you start fabricating lies and conspiracy theories. That's not how democracy is supposed to work.
A tiny number of ballots may be targeted by fraud, but studies show it affects fewer than 1 in a million mail-in votes. States use a variety of safeguards, such as signature verification, secure drop boxes, and tracking mechanisms to make sure ballots are authentic, traceable, and auditable. With all of the noise and misinformation being spread, it's important to remember why all this matters. Voting in elections is a key factor in how your community is represented. Take away your vote and your voice essentially disappears. And without the option to vote by mail, millions would face greater barriers to being represented. In a time where Americans are juggling multiple jobs and bracing for looming Medicaid cuts passed by Trump and Republicans, fair representation is crucial. But Trump's vision for American elections is truly chilling.
You know, because the states are just an agent of the federal government, of you. You had to demand paper ballots. You had to demand one-day elections.
He's claiming that states are simply agents of the federal government, and that as president, he represents that government, which means he believes he has the authority to tell governors and election officials what to do. The truth is that states run their own elections under their own rules and nationwide standards set by Congress. The president cannot dictate how they do it. But what makes this even more alarming is that, again, this statement came after Trump met with Vladimir Putin, someone who has crushed his own country's calls for free and fair elections.
I don't think Donald Trump wants another election. Were you there January 6th? He dialed for 11, almost 12,000 votes. Now he's doing it in plain sight. And people say, oh, just Trump being Trump. Wake up.
Listen, it doesn't matter what party you belong to. No president has the power Trump is claiming that he has. In a democracy, elections are run by the people, not dictated by one person. Yet Trump has repeatedly suggested, falsely, that people want him to be a dictator.
You are promising America tonight you would never abuse power as retribution against anybody.
Except for day one.
Every day, he's pushing the limits, undermining the norms that protect your power and your vote. Getting rid of voting by mail is just one piece of a much larger power grab. And as we head into 2026, he's openly doing everything he can to rig the system in his favor, borrowing tactics from dictators and autocrats. If America is to remain the land of the free, it will require all of us to be brave in the face of a wannabe strongman who's just too afraid to face the American people at the ballot box. So please, get involved. Hold your elected officials accountable, whatever party they belong to. And above all else, do not let this administration take your voice away from you.